What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to show you how to trick out your Alabama rig. It's no secret that Alabama rigs catch them late in the fall and throughout the winter months, but depending on where you are, it can be really tricky to set them up to effectively fish in your state. Each state has their own regulations, and to effectively trick them out, there's some certain tricks that I like to do. So starting with the jig head, when picking your jig head, there's a couple things that I really like to look at. First off, I want a thick, heavy wire hook. I like to use 20-pound straight fluorocarbon and either a flipping rod or an Alabama rig rod, a 7/6 to 8-foot heavy rod. And I want a hook that I can't bend out. I want a hook that I can stick them and boat flip that fish and know that they're going to stay on there. The other thing I like is a 60-degree line tie. That makes the line tie make it go a little bit more forward as opposed to a 90-degree, which is more vertical. That when the A-rig is swimming through the water, that creates everything more in line versus the bait being vertically down below your snap. The two jig heads that I like are the Picasso Smartmouth jig head and the Dirty Jigs Matt Allen heavy duty Swimbait head. Both of these have great hooks in them and a 60-degree line tie. Once you've picked out your jig head, it's time to figure out which swimbait you're going to use. I like to use 3 different types of swimbaits. This is a Kytek, this is a Reaction Innovations, and this is a Strike King Rage Swimmer. The Kytek is great for your main bait with the main hook on it. It's going to have a little bit wider tail action to it, and because it's a salted bait, it'll be a little bit softer. The downside to it is that it's not as durable. So if you're using dummy baits, which we'll talk about later, the other 2 options will be better. If you have an Alabama rig with 10, 12 arms on it, these are awesome. Little Dipper, it has a super tight tail action to it. The nose will swim a little bit with it, and they're awesome, great durability to them. The last one is a Rage Swimmer. Similarly to the Kytek, it has a similar swimming action to it, but because there's less salt in it, it's a much more durable bait. For dummy baits, if the fish hits it, it's going to keep that bait on the hook better than a Kytek would, but it won't have the same action to it. So there's different places to use the different salted versus not salted. The last trick to configuring your A-rig is to utilize dummies. Depending on where you are, you might not be allowed to use a hook on every single arm, but you can get around that and still fish a swimbait on all 5 of the arms. I like to use these Picasso Smartmouth dummy heads or an Owner center point spring, CPS for short. Both attach straight onto the snap on the bait, and you're going to thread the swimbait on like this, and this allows it to fish naturally like it would have a hook in it, except you can do it perfectly legally and those baits don't come off. You've got weighted, you can play with your weights if you want to do heavier weights on the bottom, lighter weights on the top, or jig heads on the bottom with the dummy heads and springs on the top. These will all play around with the weighting and how deep you want to fish your A-rig, but it's a great trick to get around any northern states that have regulations where you aren't allowed to fish a hooked bait on all 5 of the arms. The dummy baits can come in handy. So before you hit the water the next time with your Alabama rig, make sure you're familiar with the rules and regulations of your state to make sure you're fishing your A-rig effectively and legally. Don't forget these tricks to help you get around any hooked rules where you can use the dummy baits to get around that, but you want to make sure it's legal, effective, and good luck.